Hi everybody, welcome. I hope you're having a great weekend and enjoying the weather that's certainly warming up. I'm definitely going to take a walk in the sun here in a few minutes. But before that, I wanted to record this video because I want to show you how to create a Power BI dashboard using Plotly Dash in Python. So this dashboard is a replicate of this Power BI dashboard that somebody created and submitted in 2017 for Power BI Microsoft data story contest. So as you can see here, we have Bitcoin prices, the date the Bitcoin supposedly was bought, the date the Bitcoin was sold, and the amount of money that was invested in that Bitcoin, and then how much profit the person made. So if you bought something in March 3rd and sold it in November 18th of 2017, and you invested this amount of money, then you would have made $618,000 and a profit of 502%, which is amazing. So this is what we're doing here. This is an exact dashboard, but we're using Plotly and Dash, and it's just pure Python. So we're not using JavaScript or CSS or anything. It's just Python where we get the exact same results. And you can also zoom in and do cool things with the graph as well that you can't really do here unless you click on this button. And I want to show you this tutorial because Dash is becoming very, very popular. A lot of people are using it. It actually received a higher score from the reviews here on G2, a higher score than Power BI. So this is my intention is to teach you how to use Dash and create pretty much any dashboard that you want. We're going to use this GitHub. So if you want to download the code, you're using PyCharm or Visual Studios. This is the Python file, which is right here. Okay. And if you want to use a Jupyter or Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Dash, then here's a IPython file, which I'm going to be using for this video right here. Now, I would recommend if you want to go into the description below the video, I'm also going to have a link with a video layout, so you can jump to any section of the video that you would like. The video, I'm going to focus in this tutorial on the layout and then on the 5 different callbacks. The callbacks is what makes the Dash elements interact with each other. So the first callback is going to focus on this section. The second callback is going to connect between the dates and the slider. Third callback is the graph. Fourth callback is these 4. And then the fifth callback is going to connect between the buttons and the conclusion. So jump to any section of the callback that you would like of the video if you want to specifically focus on that callback. All right, so let's get started. Assuming you downloaded one of these files, open them up and run it on your computer. And if not, that's okay. I'm also going to show you how to do it just on this video. So the first couple of things is we are downloading the libraries here, right? We're importing the libraries, and these libraries I'm going to use Jupyter Dash. You need Jupyter Dash. You need Dash 1.19 or higher. Anything before 1.19 won't work because of the certain callbacks that we're using. We're importing pandas and Plotly Express. And then we're going to read the data frame, right? We're going to read the JSON file. The JSON file is, as you can see here, is in the same folder as my Jupyter Python file. It has to be in the same folder, right? So I'm going to read it in here inside the pandas data frame. I'm going to create a new axis, a new index, and I'm going to make the date actually a column instead of an index. I'm going to drop the last 2 rows, since they are just description of the JSON file. And then I'm creating 2 different columns, number column and colors column. The number column is going to help us connect between the range slider and the dates right here. And the colors column is going to help us make the graph bars in different colors. So as you can see here at the very bottom that I'm printing the data frame, you'll see the number column and the colors column that I created. Okay, and the next thing you want to do is go into start the app with Jupyter Dash. I'm using the Bootstrap component, and this is the layout. Now, the layout in Dash right here, inside the Dash Bootstrap container, is everything that you are going to see on the page. So right from row 21 all the way to row 153. It seems like it's a lot of code, but it's not that complicated. All of this in here is what you actually see on the page. Okay, so for example, and this is important, you have to familiarize yourself with these components. This is just the title, if I were a rich man, and here we have two buttons, an investing button and a not investing button, right? So you can see here, if you go to the app, you have the title, and then you have the two buttons, and then you have an input and a slider, and dates and a range slider. So you can see here we have an input that starts with 10,000 and a slider that starts with 10,000, and then we have two dates. It's not a date picker range, it's a single two date components, and then you have a range slider, and underneath that you have all these cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards that you can see here. Dash bootstrap cards, 1, sell price, my profit, and all the way to conclusions. And at the very end, on the right side of the page, you have the graph, right? The pixel Plotly expressed bar chart inside of the graph component right here. All right, so this is how the layout looks like. It's important you remember the IDs of each component, because we are going to use the IDs to tie the components to each other on the Dash app. Again, this is just a layout. If you actually, these are all the callbacks. If you actually hashtag out all the callbacks so they're not part of the app, you'll see that the app will show certain things, but they're not connected. The slider is not connected to the date picker. This slider is not connected to the dollar amount. There's nothing here, and the graph is not changing with the changes of the days or anything else. So to actually connect all of this, we are using the callbacks. All these callbacks right here, like I said, there's 5 different callbacks. All right, so let's go into the first callback, the select dollar amount. This callback right here is going to be tie this input field with the slider. So if I move the slider, this changes. If I move the input field, the slider will move as well, as you can see. All right, so how am I doing this? Let's go back to the code and take a look. What I'm doing here, I'm taking 2 inputs, the input of the slider and the input of the D amount. Remember, the D amount, if you go back to the layout, the D amount is the callback ID of the input field, right? So I'm taking the value, which is 10,000, and I'm taking the value of the slider inside my inputs right here. And it's always top to bottom. So if I have 2 inputs, the first one is this and the second one is this, it's left to right. I need 2 arguments inside the callback function. Input value refers to this, and slider value refers to this. If you added another input, you would need to add another argument in here. Okay? Okay. What I'm doing here, I'm actually going to take this, which is it's Dash language, to understand what input was triggered, what button was triggered or component, right? You don't have to understand this, it's just copy paste. Anytime you use component triggered, just copy paste this code, and then typically you will see this. If the component triggered is equal to the slider, now slider is because the slider is the ID. If it's equal to the slider, then do something. If it's not equal to the slider, then it's probably equal to, the only other option is D amount. So it's either slider or D amount. And I'm saying, if it's equal to the slider, if the slider is the component that is triggered, right? I'm triggering the slider right now and moving the slider. If that was triggered, then assign the slider value, which is right here, which is, let's say, the slider value right now at the very beginning is 10,000. So assign this value of 10,000 to the input value, and then return both input value and slider value. So in essence, I'm returning, if this is 10,000, this is also 10,000, and then I'm returning here 10,000 and here 10,000. And this is returning to the outputs. All right, this is the most important part of the callback. You have to return the same amount of objects as the number of outputs that you have. If you have 2 outputs, 2 component properties in the outputs, then you need to return 2 objects, right? And it's, again, it's top to bottom, left to right. Top to bottom, left to right. So the first object, the first value or property is the value of the input. So I'm going to return this to here. And the second object is this returning to here. Top to bottom, left to right. Always remember that. So here I'm returning 10,000 and here I'm returning 10,000. And if I move the slider to, let's say, this is probably about, I didn't add marks here, but you can add marks, so you can add text so you can see where you are. But if I move this to about 500,000, let's move this to 500,000, then this is triggered. This will equal 500,000. This will equal 500,000, which means that now the input value will also equal 500,000. And then I'm just returning this right here. 500,000, 500,000, 500,000, 500,000 are the new values of the input and the slider. Same thing the other way around. Same thing if the triggered component is the input, then I'm going to return whatever that input is. This input could be, let's say, if I return 100,000. Now, if I'm returning, the input value is 100,000, then the input value is going to be assigned to the slider value. So both are 100,000, and then I just return them here, 100,000 and 100,000. See? So as you move this, the slider moves, or if you move it down, the slider moves, and if you move the slider, the input moves. So it's like a circular callback that you can do with Dash 1.19. Now we're going to do the similar thing with the second callback, this callback of buy and sell dates. This is also like a circular callback, and this will tie the dates to the slider. So if I change a date here, it will move the slider. If I change this, it will move the second slider, the second handle. It will move this handle. This is tied to this, and this one is tied to this. And same thing if I do the slider, it will change the dates here. All right. Now, how do I do that? What I'm doing here, I'm taking three inputs. So I'm taking the date property of this component, and I'm taking the date property of this component. These are the date components. If you go all the way up, you'll see on row 58. This is the first date component, the date picker single component, and this is the second, my date picker end ID. All right, so I'm taking these two values, the date property, that's what I'm taking. I'm also going to take the value property, which is a list here of the range slider. So this is, remember, this is a list. Don't forget, this is important. This is a list. Let's go back down. So we're taking the value list of the slider date. This is the range slider. So we have three inputs. We need three arguments. This one, top to bottom, left to right. This one refers to this. This one refers to this. And this one refers to this. And now I'm doing the same thing, just copy paste, just like I had here, copy paste. I have my component triggered. And now I'm asking if the component triggers is the slider date. Slider date is the ID. If this is a component triggered, then do something. Or if this is a component triggered, the start date or the end, the first date component or the second date component, first date component triggered or the second date component triggered, then also do something, right? Create new objects, object, object, objects. And then I'm returning these objects, right? So the first object is going to return to the date property of the first component. The second date is going to return to the second component, and then the slider value. It's similar to this, but it's not the same. It's a different component. This one will refer to the value of the slider, the range slider, right? Which is this value right here, whatever value that is. It's a list, so the first item and the second item of the list. All right, so let's see how this works as an example. So I'm saying if the component trigger was slider date. So let's see a slider date. Let's say we choose. Let's say this is about 34. Let's say this is about 34, right? So what happens if I do this right now? Because I just triggered the slider. So this is like saying I chose a list because the slider component, this value right here is a list. So let's say I chose 34, comma, and the second one, let's say it's whatever, 389, right? 389 right here, and this is 389. Now, where are these numbers coming from? Because you can't really see the numbers here. These numbers are coming from the slider range itself, right here. Range slider, the value goes from 0 to 389. This is the initial value, but it goes from 0 to 389. So go all the way back down. And now you'll see, let's say I chose 34 and 389 on the range slider, 34 to 389. Now what I'm saying is filter the data frame where the value of the numbers column equals the first item in the list, right? The first item in the list. So where this equals 34, right? This will only show up as one row because there's only one row that equals 34. And now take that row, that data frame row, and take the date column and the value of that date column. So if I chose, for example, the number 3, not 34, but 3, filter the data frame so I only have this, and then just take the date value. So I'm taking this value right here, right? So I took the date value, well, let's say it's equal, whatever, 2017, 2 and 4. Let's say it's equal that, 2017, 2 and 4. So take this date value. Do the same thing with this right here. Filter the data frame where the number value equals the second item of the list. So it equals this, 389, right? Which equals this right here, 389. Filter the data, so it's only one row. Take the date and take from the date column, take the date value. All right, so this date value, which will be the last date value, because 389 in the numbers column is actually the last row. So whatever that last row is, maybe I think it's 2018 124, I think. All right, so now we have a start date and an end date. And now just return this into our outputs. So the start date, this 2017-24, is going to return to the date picker right here. The end date is going to return to the second date component right here. And the slider value comes from, this is not triggered, so it doesn't come from here, it comes from here. And the slider value is what we chose, right? Where is it? Is 34 to 389. Right, and that's going to be returned to right here. So that's why if I move the slider to about 365 or 360, I'm returning this date right here. If I'm moving the first item in the slider list, it's changing the first date component, right? And then I do this the other way around, right? Just like we did here, the other way around. If the component triggered is the date, one of these dates are triggered right here, then take that date, filter the data frame according to that date, and then just take the value in the numbers column. And that's only one row, so it's only going to be one value. Take the value of this data frame that's filtered by the end date, and then just create a new slider value list, which is going to be the first number and the second number. And then I'm returning this list right here instead of that. Okay? So that's what it's doing. You can return any number you want. If you know, let's say I want to return in this list, I want to return 1 and 388, or let's say 200, 250. Obviously, this is not interactive. I'm just returning always 1 and 250. This is 1, and this is 250 right here. This would be 389, but this would be 250. You see, it always jumps back because I'm always returning the same slider, right? So this is not recommended. This is just to show you how you're returning different numbers into the slider value right here. All right, so that was the second component. The third component is updating the graph. And this is, I think, a little bit easier than the last callback. Here, I'm taking the date value from the first date component and the date value from the second date component, so this one and this one. I'm taking them and then doing something with them inside the callback function. I'm filtering the data frame. I'm building a Plotly Express bar figure, and then I'm returning the figure to the figure property of the bar chart. Now, if you go to the bar chart all the way up, row 143, you'll see that the bar chart is called bar chart ID. and the figure is a property. So you can't just put anything you want. You have to take a property that belongs to this component. So this figure is a property of the Dash core component graphs. So instead of this, I'm actually going to return a different figure. Let's go back down. So let's see here. I'm taking the start date and the end date of this. I'm making a copy of the data frame. Always make a copy of the data frame. And then I'm filtering the data frame. So the data frame, the date column, take the date column where the values, the dates are bigger or equal to the start date, and the values of another date column here are smaller or equal to end date. So it's going to be between. So if I chose here February 17 to November 30th. February 17 to November 30th. Now I have only a smaller data frame with only those rows. And I'm going to say inside the color column of this new data frame, put the string black. All right. So instead of, you see all the way down here, instead of turquoise, put the string. The string is going to be black. Okay. But it's not for all the data frame. It's only for the data frame that was within these two dates. These are going to be black. So now some rows in the colors column will be black and some will still be turquoise, because turquoise is something that I set at the very, very top. At the very beginning, you'll see turquoise. So everything is turquoise, but some of them are going to be black. So you go down here. We have row 207. Some of these are black. And now I'm just creating the bar figure, right? So I'm doing DFF is the new data frame. X is the date. X-axis is date. Y-axis is BPI, the Bitcoin price. And then I'm just changing the marker color. I'm changing the bars would be according to the DFF colors column. So the DFF colors column, some of them are black and some of them are turquoise according to the dates that we filtered, right? And then this is just making the graph a little bit bigger. And then it's returning the figure into the figure property. So if I choose, for example, from all the way from 1 to all the way to the very end, I could actually change this all the way to the very end, January 24th, then all the rows within this date range are going to be black. That's why you don't see anything that's turquoise. Everything is black. All right, let's go to our fourth callback. Our fourth callback is update prices and profits. So this right here, it's updating these four dashboard cards. Take a little bit break or a side commercial, and just want to say that if this tutorial so far has been benefiting you and you've learned a lot, I hope you would consider supporting my cause, supporting my work. This takes a lot of time and resources, and your support is very much appreciated. So you can either join my YouTube membership, my YouTube channel, or click on the link above if you would like to check out my Patreon and get more information on Dash Plotly. Thank you. Okay, so the fourth callback. Let's create all this data right here. So let's go in there. So here I'm taking 3 inputs, right? There's 3 component properties. That's why we have 3 arguments right here. And then I'm doing something. I'm creating different objects in Python. And then I'm returning these objects into the outputs. Now, because I have 4 outputs, I have 4 objects here. And each one of them goes into their respective output property. Okay, so if you forgot the layout, these are the children. These properties belong to each Bootstrap card. So this bought and sold children, we can go up to row bought and sold. Go to row 92, you'll see the ID is bought. This is the ID of just an HTML, and I'm returning something into a string into the children of this ID. So I'm going to return a string here, and I'm going to return a string into this ID, this component right here, and also here, and also here. All right. This is the output. That's what I'm returning. So what I'm doing here, I'm taking the both dates, start date and end date, and the value of the slider. This is not the range slider. This is the regular slider. This is the one right here. I'm taking this value. So this is not, it's not a list, it's a string. And I'm saying filter the data frame. So the date column, the value of the date column equals the start date. So it's only going to be one row because I have 1 day per row. So this is going to be a full data frame of all columns but one row. So I'm going to take the BPI column and that value from that column. So if I, for example, chose the start date to be 2017 January 2nd, if I chose January 2nd here, then it's going to filter the data frame so only this row shows up. And then I'm going to take the BPI values. I'm going to take this 1018. So I'm taking the BPI value 1018, and then I'm formatting it, right? This is like 1018, right? I'm going to format it so I have a $sign before it. And then I put a comma. If it's like more than 1,000, it's going to have a comma. And I'm only going to have 2 digits after the dot, right? And then I'm returning this by price formatted right here as the first object of my children of the bot component, HTML H2. So if I go here and I say move this to, the dates. Let's move this date to January 31st. January 31st is one row. It has a BPI value of 967. The $sign comes before, only 2 digits after the dot, and if it's a bigger price, then it's going to be with a comma. Okay, so this is the children of the bot component, which is HTML.h2 or h3. I'm doing the same thing with the sold price, filtering the data frame according to the end date, according to this one right here. I'm going to have one row. From that row, take the BPI value and format it the same way I've formatted this one right here. And then just return it, sold price formatted. Here, I'm going to see my profit. So this profit is going to be this right here, right? What I'm doing is I'm saying, this is just a small, not algorithm, function, math, just taking the slider value, which is this value right here, whatever that is. Take that value, divide it by 1,000, and then just do the sold price. I want to see my profit, so it's usually the new price minus the old price times this right here because of the Bitcoin and dollar differences. This is how he's doing it on his website right here. But you can do it any way you want, right? And then my profit, just format it the same way with no digits after the dot, right? And I'm returning it right here, which is the children of the profit number. Go up and see what this is. And the last thing I'm doing, I'm returning the profit margin, which is a percentage, just doing sold minus bought, which is the margin, and then divide it by the bought price times 1,000. This is just simple math, how to see your increase percentage-wise, and then just format it and return it to the children of the profit percentage. What is that? Children, profit PCT, row 119. This is the children right here. Okay? So this is the 4th callback, right? The last callback is going to be the invested buttons. Now the invested button is this. As I change this, right? As I change this, I'm actually changing this right here. I am rich, or a different text right here. And I'm changing the color of the button. So how do I do that? I'm actually going to go in here to the last callback. And here I'm taking 2 inputs, the end clicks of each button. And I'm going to output the message and the different colors of the Dash Bootstrap button component, right? These colors are properties of the button component. So if you go into the button component in Bootstrap, you'll see here there are color as a property. Color is a property of button component. You can see all the way down here as well. that color is one of the properties. So you can't put anything you want there. You can only use a property that belongs to the Bootstrap. And I have like 9 different options here, either primary, secondary, and that's the color that I want. So if I want blue, I don't put blue here, I put primary. This is a Bootstrap class. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking the color color property, right? So I'm saying, let's see what button was triggered. Doesn't matter how many times it was triggered, just I want to see which one was triggered. If the not invested button was triggered, do something. If the invested button was triggered, this right here, then do something else, right? Create different objects and then return these objects in the return of the callback function, which returns it right here. So just as an example, if the component triggered was invested button, if this was a component triggered, then the message is going to be I am rich, just a string, and I'm returning this message right here, right, inside the children of the concluding remarks. And then I'm saying the color, the invested color is going to be called info, and the non-invested color is going to be called light. So this is info, and this is light, which goes into here. Info and light, right? These are the colors. Again, because in the Dash Bootstrap, you have info and you have light. You can't return teal and gray or teal and white. You have to return these Bootstrap classes inside the color property. You have to assign them inside the color property. So this is a little bit of Dash Bootstrap, but if you want to learn more about Dash Bootstrap, which will help you understand how I'm creating rows and columns and using some class names to create some spaces between the components, click on the video above. This is the introduction and a complete tutorial of Dash Bootstrap. Once you see that, it will be a lot clearer how to style your app. It's not that important right now. The most important thing is to understand the callback, which is why I focused on the callback in this tutorial. But if you want to learn about the styling, then you can look at the video above. Also, if you want to learn about the card body, which is a Dash Bootstrap card, DBC card, there's another video where you can learn about the card, which will explain a little bit of this. Again, you see that for about 30 minutes, and you'll understand the card. And lastly, if this was relatively new to you and the callback is something you really need more videos on, more tutorials, click on this video above and it will show you all about the callback, introduction to the callback. We'll explain the output, we'll explain the input, and I think it even explains the state, so this was a lot clearer for you. That's pretty much it. I hope you benefited from this. If you did, subscribe below, hit the like button, and please consider supporting my work. It does mean a lot to me. It encourages me to continue and to simplify these difficult topics for you. We're better together, so help each other out and never give up. Keep practicing. Talk to you later.